But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
This is HBR News number 224. Brock Turner's Accuser has a new book out. Siri is a feminist. Zoe Quinn caught lying, where we reflect on the stories of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Uhuru, y'all, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I am your host, Brian, and I am joined by, as always, my esteemed panelists, Hannah and the two mics. We have a great show lined up for you guys today, so please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as the comments section. On this week's HBR News Show, we'll be talking about the events of the week, which include Brock Turner's Victim breaking her silence in a new memoir that you guys can buy on Amazon pretty soon, Siri deflects questions on feminism, a dad who was jailed for criticizing the court system, and more. So stick around, it's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only after show. I'm displaying it right now so you guys can see what it is. Lori Penny, you may have heard. Lori Penny has used her booger-smeared hands to write an article in the wake of the recent suicide of one Alec Holoka, who is someone that we've talked about on the show recently. Actually, it was last week. I'll just give you like a little bit of a teaser as to what the content of this opinion piece is going to be. By reading you the first paragraph, okay? Here's what she writes. The video games industry is having its hashtag #MeToo movement, and the backlash against it has been fast and brutal. Developers and creators are bravely going public about decades of exploitation, including at the hands of respected figures who have contributed to beloved franchises. The response has been moral outrage. Not that there's an epidemic of men hurting women and covering for each other. Not that sexual harassment has been tacitly tolerated within the industry, but that women have the gall to complain. It should be fun. Amazing. So let's find out just how badly this article has aged, it's literally like only about 4 days old or 5 days old. But let's find out how badly it's aged in the wake of recent information, which we're going to be going into on today's show, shall we? Thank you for the subscription, Y Dot. Thank you for joining us on the Badger Notification Squad. So anyway, if you'd like to participate in our after shows, either as an audience member or a participant, please consider becoming a Badger yourself by going to www.feedthebadger.com and starting a monthly subscription. $5 will get you into the Discord, and there is a great community in there of great folks doing all kinds of stuff all the time. It seems like it's a constantly quite an active space, put it that way. And if you don't want to wake up one morning and find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channels, please go to badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com. Okay, so let's get started by, well, we're going to get right into the story. So first one we're going to talk about is Brock Turner. So this one, written by my wife, Stapler, it goes as follows. Brock Turner continues to be a name on the tongues of feminists as both an example of, quote, white privilege, end quote, and of, quote, rape culture, end quote. USA Today reports that the victim is now cashing in on a new book about her experience. Know My Name, that's the name of the book. Her memoir out this month. Wow, that's great timing. Be sure to buy it right away. It will, quote, reclaim the story of her sexual assault, end quote. Which, of course, it will be her story, the one that she couldn't remember because she was unconscious and drunk. But we'll get into the details of the Brock Turner case if you don't already know. So from the USA Today article, this is what they write. Quote, Emily Doe's experience illuminates a culture built to protect perpetrators and a criminal justice system designed to fail the most vulnerable, said Viking editor-in-chief Andrea Schulz. The book will introduce readers to the writer whose words have already changed their world and moved them with its accounting of her courage and resilience. It is one of the most important books I've ever published, Schultz told The Times. saying she hopes it will, quote, change the culture that we live in and the assumptions we make about what survivors should be expected to go through to get justice, end quote. This is right there on the corner of Stunning and Brave. That's where you can buy this book. The article cites the 1 in 5 rape statistic and links to another article called, quote, Rape at College, Why Back to School is So Dangerous for Women. Stay afraid, ladies. Stay afraid. All right. Does anyone have any comments on this story?
Oh, yes. All right. So rape shield laws were fought for years by feminists under the assumption or the claim that if women didn't have protection from people knowing who they were when they make accusations, they would be in danger. That no woman would want her name out there associated with being raped because there's a stigma, and it's a life-ruining thing, and she can't move on if people know she's the victim, right? So right out of the chute, here we have this woman just pissing all over that, but it's not really surprising, honestly. And I would recommend everyone who has paid any attention or is paying any attention to this particular news story, to this particular like the whole history of it, the assault allegation, the original assault allegation, the case itself, everything that came out afterwards, the feminist protest, all of that, should read an article on A Voice for Men. The title is A Scrape on Campus, Holes in the Stanford Rape Conviction. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but I mean, August I know is right, but August Levenskjold's went through this accuser's victim impact statement, and basically found every spot where she has contradicted herself or contradicted her official story about what she does or does not remember, demonstrated that she basically went in with sort of an attitude towards the people at the university that she was going to this party where this incident occurred and everything. And it really does indicate that basically the way she talked about it really does indicate that this is a woman who went to this party basically to be the sort of popular older girl or interesting older girl who shows up at a college party, and then was embarrassed that she was stumbled across by strangers in the circumstance that she put herself in that alley. And sorry, I'm having allergy problems, so
Tis
you're
the
gonna have to deal
season.
with me clearing my throat at you guys.
Yeah,
But
Hannah only has.
yeah,
I can hear it. Hannah only has allergy problems on days that end in Y. So
yep,
this isn't all the time.
And states that end in Ohio.
yes, and 11.99 repeating months out of the year. So yeah, but this is it's August, or not August, but September. It's fall. It's getting to that point of the year where the mold is high and the ragweed is having its fun, and I'm having a rough time.
Yeah.
So, but in any case, yeah, I definitely recommend going through and reading this. And it's specifically because this is this case is not as cut and dried as everyone is making it out to be. The other thing that I want people to understand is, and I wrote about this too, this was not a case of some sober guy taking advantage of a passed out drunk woman that he stumbled across, somewhere and decided to mess with. Right? This was a couple of drunk teenagers. Well, she was actually in her 20s, but a couple of drunk young people who wandered off to his room planning to have sex, because you don't go to a college guy's room while you're drunk at a party to play tiddlywinks. I just got
Hannah. Oh no. Are you guys there? Is that?
Us guys are here. I mean,
Oh,
there's
okay.
nobody here but us chickens.
Hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up, Hannah. It's okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. So you were saying
Okay.
you were going to the room
Yeah,
for
you don't
not
you don't
going
go
for
to a
tiddlywinks. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't go to a guy's room, after a party while you're drunk to play tiddlywinks. That's and I he didn't carry her off in front of everybody either. Like they headed that way together.
Mm-hmm.
But sorry, the interruption, the internet interruption completely derailed my train of thought there. But but this is not a cut and dried case.
Mm-hmm.
And he was at the same level of drunkenness as she was. Now her blood alcohol content was higher. But if you look up the classifications for what happens to the brain and what capacity for appraising one's actions a person is considered to be at both of their listed blood alcohol contents, and that's after the incident, it's the same thing, that they don't have the ability to appraise their actions, him included, that their coordination is terrible, that they may not actually remain conscious. He was as much at risk for passing out as she was. And so what we're looking at is a conviction, and he wasn't convicted of rape. He was convicted of sexual assault, but he wasn't convicted of rape. A conviction on his part for failing to recognize that, as incapacitated as he was, his partner was slightly more incapacitated than he
Mm-hmm.
was.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. And then when she passed out, he didn't know because of his level of incapacitation. And because he is male, he is legally responsible for that. Because he is male, he is liable for her embarrassment. And because he is male, he is considered a predator, even though he did not deliberately set out to contravene someone's boundaries by the use of force, coercion, or deliberate incapacitation. And now we have this chick who has been embarrassed by this situation, coming out to the public because she can make money on a book deal.
Yep.
And she can have celebrity within the feminist movement.
I want to know how you can write a book about your experience when you were unconscious for said experience.
Well,
have you ever read Hunter
my
S.
point
Thompson?
on this, on this is, our society calls him a predator for essentially being a dunce, for being a clod. He's a predator because he's a guy. Being a clod makes him a predator, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she's capitalizing on that label. She's capitalizing on that experience. And she's capitalizing on the outrage, our outrage culture that we're in the middle of. She's capitalizing on the outrage that was stirred up by the feminist movement around this case because they had to lie about it, right? What does that make her?
Stunning and brave, Hannah.
Right?
Stunning
What
and
does
brave.
it make her? Taking advantage of the emotions that were elicited among women throughout the country who were lied to about this case. What does that make her? Taking advantage of the emotions that were elicited among parents throughout the country who were lied to about what happened at that college. And what does that make her? Taking financial and status advantage of his misfortune of having happened to have been a clod around the wrong woman. One who wasn't responsible enough to step up and say, I am really embarrassed about this, but he didn't rape me.
Well, I think that to say something like that takes integrity, and that's just like hard to come by.
Given how much notoriety and indeed how much capital you can get from a public sort of rape case like this, you might wonder why it doesn't happen more often with consentingly skullduggerous couples, so to speak. Why don't more couples just sort of mutually between them pretend that a rape happened, and if it's the kind of rape where the woman can't produce the correct evidence, then it'll all get thrown out. And it's largely because it's so risky for men, and largely because I don't think men get off on that particular fantasy.
No.
The one of actually being a rapist. Anything like as much as women get off on the other end of it. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's
You
pretty
mean
distorted.
men aren't excited about the idea of not being wanted by the person they're with?
Yeah, really.
Color me shocked.
Didn't Christine Blasey Ford also like release a book or something with her sort of memoirs in them? I think that was something. This seems to be like a trend. Like, oh, I know that there were some victims of Bill Cosby that also are supposedly like making books or something. I could be mistaken, but I think that that's the case. It seems like a pattern, and I suspect, based on the way that the art, like essentially the voice of this Emily Doe, who is the woman that doesn't really sound like a real name, but who is the woman that supposedly came forward. She's being spoken for by this Andrea Schultz person, who is the editor-in-chief at the publisher. And I wonder if that person didn't see dollar signs and when she spoke to Emily. Because I'm still like, how do you write an account of something that you likely don't have a memory of because you weren't conscious for it, unless there's going to be a whole lot of, let's say, dramatizing, adaptations, liberties, let's say, taken to tell this story, and in the hopes that you can make a buck. Meanwhile, it also serves as further, let's say, socially incriminating social evidence against Brock Turner. Which what I mean by that is that even if the guy was found innocent, and this is something we covered this story, like, how old is this thing? Like over a year old, right? I remember us doing a story on it a long time ago, and we were talking about how even if the guy is found innocent, he could be in a lot of trouble, right? He could not, have problems with his finishing school, have problems in his job prospects in the future, but not more than that. There were people outside of his house with guns that were convinced that he got away with rape because of feminists and the way that they report it in the media. And this article, written by USA Today, it sort of like continues to drive that point home. They don't care about innocent or until proven guilty. They want to use this to destroy not just this man, but to serve as a warning to any man who approach women, right, at school or at work or whatever, and get involved with them. This is the reason why there are men that are checking out. They don't want to hire women. They don't want women to work under them. They don't want to associate with them at school. They are avoiding them at all costs because the cost is far too high, and you just don't know. And look, I don't even know that this woman and this young lady who messed around with Brock Turner, I don't know that she originally wanted to ruin his life. I think that they were sexually attracted to each other. They got drunk. This happened. And then, like, all these people swept in and convinced her that what happened to her was rape or sexual assault, and that this guy just got away with it. And now she seems to be caught up in believing this. And I think that this sort of thing definitely happens. And my guess is that is what's happened here. So yeah, this is I'm surprised that we are still talking about this story and there are still developments happening, but we have to let you guys know what is going on. But this is the case that will never die. They will use Brock Turner as an example to prove their rape culture on college campuses thing. That's going to be the thing that they talk about until they have something more egregious. This will always be news for them. One other thing too is that in the original article, they cite the 1 in 5 rape statistic, which we've already, it's been debunked 100 million times, and we've talked about it on the show multiple times. But they also link to another article called Rape at College by Why Back to School is So Dangerous for Women. That is actually another USA Today article I looked at, and it's basically just the same old shit. The whole thing is, how do we scare the shit out of women who go to college? How do we make them terrified to go to school and pursue an education? We tell them that all of the men there are preying on them, are waiting for an opportunity to rape them, and they want to get away with it. And of course, this doesn't do women or men good, but they don't care. They have no scruples. They have a narrative to push. So
something to understand about this, they don't actually need a worse case to come out. They don't need a case that is in any way, shape, or form conducive to their goals. All they have to do is tell everybody, you can't question our narrative about this case because that's victim blaming and it's misogyny, and you're not allowed to question it. And as long as that is the way things are in our society, we will be stuck with this situation. We have to be able to look at feminists who want to classify or characterize incidents that are not necessarily acts of predation by anybody, that they want to classify those in black and white terms and classify one side of that incident, the male side obviously, as a predator. And then even though they're arguing that he's a predator by accident or a predator by being a clod, turn around and say that this makes him irredeemable in society for the rest of his life because obviously he's tainted by some sort of violent impulses that can never go away. As long as we're accepting that, we're never going to get past this. There will be incident after incident after incident that they lie to us about over and over again until the public story is accepted. And there will be incident after incident after incident where you are not allowed to question the dominant narrative or the feminist narrative or the media narrative or the female narrative, the gynocentric narrative on that incident because they said so. So you have to be able to develop a very thick skin toward being labeled a misogynist, labeled a rape apologist, labeled a victim blamer, and turn around and say, no, I don't accept that. You cannot tell me that it's okay for you to transfer women's agency and women's personal accountability to men just because they had a beer or even 6 beers. That's not okay. All that does is perpetuate a cycle of women doing stupid things, then doing stupid things with guys, then feeling victimized, and then being told by feminists, you can never recover from this. You're broken for the rest of your life, you poor thing. Now you have to be psychologically handicapped forever. And what do they do to the guys? They're unpersoned.
Mm-hmm.
So we lose 2 people every time this happens. And every time this happens, feminists gear up towards forcing society to lose dozens or hundreds or thousands more to this same stupid narrative. It has to stop. Don't accept it. And don't let your legislators accept it. This is happening right now. And she's getting media attention right now because feminists are in a death struggle to try to manipulate the Republicans who are sort of in charge right now into re-upping the Violence Against Women Act. It's dead in the water right now. And it needs to stay that way. The Violence Against Women Act was never a good thing. It was never necessary. It should never have happened. And there is a chance to make it go away and return to the gender-neutral standards and the proper due process approach that was in the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act, if the Republicans will stand their ground. If those gynocentric traditionalists do not bend to the will of people claiming to represent women's interests. So they have to hear from everyone. Don't back down on this. That's a bad law. And of course, they've got their victim. Right? The feminists have their victim that they can use, their martyr for the cause in this woman. And she is probably just about as flawed as you can get for a martyr.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be very important to point that out. And it's going to be very important to point out that it is not acceptable to sacrifice men's lives, whether it's through the ruination of their lives or through badgering them to death, or through incarceration or whatever. It's not acceptable to sacrifice men's lives in order to protect women from accountability for their own choices. So contact your legislators.
There you go. All right. Anyone else have any thoughts on this story before I move on to the next one? Okay, we got a couple super chats. Zeranx gives us $5 and says, while we're discussing stunning and brave survivors, might I offer you guys a super chat? Point of personal privilege, do not use gendered language to address everybody. Meredith Glassberg gives us $5 and says, think about it. Anita Hill created an entire career off her victim status despite books showing how she lied. Oh yeah, that's right. There's a lot of money and fame to be made from victim status. It's anyway, I don't want to get too
Whoa. There's a lot of money to be made from victim status for this particular area if you're a woman.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. If you're a woman.
Because
yeah,
if you look at, there's an almost identical story to this. Well, I guess there's a couple of differences. Like there was no party, right? But the victim was drunk. The victim was so drunk that as to have difficulty maintaining consciousness, as to be unaware of the victim's significant body odor as described by the perpetrator, as to be unable to see straight, right? And as to invite somebody over that the victim might not have seen as potentially attractive without the alcohol, basically beer goggles. And the perpetrator did a kind of comedy routine bragging about the incident years later, and people called her stunning and brave. And what else did they say? Jennifer Vineyard of thevulture.com called her speech powerful, intense, and inspirational. Amelia McDowell Perry of thefrisky.com called it hilariously moving and powerful, and no doubt relatable to any woman who has struggled with self-esteem issues. Amelia Diamond of manrepeller.com, what a lovely name for a website, called the speech awesome, referring to it as an anecdote that would make you laugh. Charlotte Alter of Time.com, that's Time Magazine's Time.com, referred to Amy Schumer's speech bragging about raping a guy when she was in college, at least according to feminist standards, as 2 confidence boosters for the price of 1. Jessica Goodman, entertainment editor of The Huffington Post, called Schumer's speech funny, sweet, and sad all at once. And again, powerful. So when a guy who is drunk is a clod and doesn't notice that his sex partner passed out, he's a rapist. He's irredeemable. For the rest of his life, he should be condemned. And every man on the planet is responsible for what he did. And there needs to be laws to protect women from guys who don't notice that their partner is too drunk to be into what they're doing. And all of that. But when Amy Schumer talks about having gone to a guy's home after he called her when he was blind, stinking drunk, and having sex with him, letting him perform oral on her while he couldn't remain conscious, describes his experience of whiskey dick, makes fun of his decor, makes fun of his appearance, makes fun of him for being a 5-year senior. She's just awesome, right? She's not a predator, even though she was 100% sober when she went over there. She was fully able to assess his incapacitation, his level of incapacitation. And she's not responsible for anything he did because he consented. That's the argument that David Futrell made in his blog. She consented, so it wasn't rape, or he consented, so it wasn't rape. Right? He was just as drunk as the woman in the Brock Turner case. This was almost identical. The main differences were Turner didn't admit to noticing that the other party had become unconscious. Turner didn't admit to proceeding with sex during and after the other party's unconsciousness because he didn't admit to knowing that the other party was unconscious. Schumer did both. Turner wasn't sober during the sex act. Schumer was. And Schumer wasn't convicted of a crime for having engaged in it. Turner was. So there you go. There's lots of money to be made by being the victim of a guy, or at least claiming to be the victim of a guy. But there's a lot more money to be made in claiming to be the perpetrator if you're a woman.
Yeah, I would, it would be like I want to make an assumption. I would think that most people who were real victims, they usually don't think that they want to profit off of that, because they may, that's just something they want to put behind themselves so they can move on with their lives. I think the people who tend to, I'm not saying that there are no cases where people want to hear that story, but I question the I guess what we're running into is there are people who are saying, well, we should hear her story because she is the victim. Well, you have to determine whether or not someone really is a victim before you say their story should be told. And so this is for people who are real victims. Determine the difference, right? And I would guess that people who are looking to make a buck are more likely to make shit up to do so than people who have actually had a real, traumatic experience like rape. And they usually don't want to go back and profit off of it. They usually just want to move on with their lives. So I would think that there's a big difference. All right. Super chats. Go ahead, Mike.
By the way, if you are one of those people who's of the belief that erection equals consent, you cannot simultaneously be of the belief that whiskey dick equals consent, because that would sort of indicate that anything that happens to a guy with whiskey dick is rape, right?
Yeah. There you go. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next story. Thanks, guys, for your comments and feedback. Please let us know what you think in the comments about this story. So we're going to move on to the next one. Man criticizes county family court system and ends up getting arrested. So Jonathan Vanderhagen lost a custody battle with his ex-wife. He lost the custody battle, and his wife was awarded sole custody of the kids. Nearly 2 years ago, Jonathan's son died while he was in the custody of his mother. That's the son of the man who we're talking about here. So basically, his ex-wife had custody of the kids at the time that his son died. Jonathan's lawyer warned that something bad was going to happen to the child and that the mother had too many red flags. The court dismissed those claims as issues that were, quote, in the past, end quote. The police report filed after the child's death shows that he had a previous medical condition, and the investigators did not believe that the mother was at fault. Jonathan did not agree and posted criticisms on his Facebook page about the judge who presided over the case. Judge Rachel Rancillo saw those posts, some of which targeted her. Well, I mean, they were criticisms of her. I mean, he was angry. His son was basically died, right? She did not hear this particular case. Rancillo felt uncomfortable and potentially threatened by those posts. The Macomb County Sheriff's Office investigated but found that Jonathan Vanderhagen did not threaten harm or violence. Despite this, though, he was charged with malicious use of telecommunications services. God, is that really a law? And was released on bond. He then posted, quote, "Dada, back to digging, and you best believe I'm gonna dig up all the skeletons in this court's closet," end quote. He was then jailed and has a bond of $500,000. His mother said that, quote, "He just wants justice. He don't want to kill anybody. He don't want anybody physically hurt. He wants them to acknowledge what they've done and get justice," end quote. A jury trial is set for September 13th. This took place in I believe this is Detroit, by the way, or at least the Detroit area.
That's not surprising. Let me put this into another set of words, all right? A citizen has been jailed for criticizing his government's injustice toward his family and for stating that he was going to engage in citizen vigilance and pay attention to what his government has been doing and what it is doing in the United States.
Is that
That
not
is
a
what just
violation of
happened
the
here.
First Amendment?
Yes,
Even
his
considering
First Amendment right.
it can only be the government doing it.
It is. This is the thing. This is like a fundamental thing in the United States, right? It is our right and our job as citizens of this country to monitor what our government is doing and call them out on it when they do something wrong. That's fundamental to the country. It's part of the reason why we are a country, a separate country, and not still colonies of England. That is one of the reasons why we left. And now we have a government officials in the state of Michigan jailing a man for doing it after they killed his child by leaving the child with someone that he pointed out was dangerous. Think about that.
Yeah, this man's son died, but the judge didn't like what he said on Facebook. So off to the gulag with you. That's crazy.
It's one theory that first the Second Amendment is taken away, and then the First Amendment is. First they remove your guns, and then they remove your free speech. But I'm pretty convinced it's the other way around, yo. You're seeing it happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. We got a couple super chats from Ancapistan, who just loves this, I think, in a way. French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, we wouldn't our court to be accountable to the people. Now, would we? And then he gives another $5 and says, but remember, kids, the government works for the citizens. The people are the employers of the government, right? Okay. Thank you for the super chats. Yeah, this is pretty messed up. I don't know what else to say except, holy shit, the guy got arrested for malicious use of telecommunications services, which I've never heard of.
By the way, that is a law. And it's not just a law in Michigan. That's actually part of the Violence Against Women Act. You can be considered guilty of stalking or harassment if you use a telecommunications system to engage in engage in a course of conduct that causes or could be reasonably expected to cause substantial emotional distress to another person in the United States. That is the minimum standard for that. There's other things that are worse that if you do those are also caught in it. But the bottom of it, the least you have to do to get on the wrong side of the Violence Against Women Act is have somebody accuse you of engaging in a course of conduct online from within the United States that causes them, a citizen of the United States, substantial emotional distress.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if we were unscrupulous and we wanted to, the women who are in the United States that have been written about by David Futrell on his blog could conceivably accuse him of stalking her and harassment under the Violence Against Women Act, and he might get convicted because he's actually said some pretty, well, they would be reasonably expected to cause most women substantial emotional distress. He said some pretty nasty things. And he's actually made some very serious accusations on occasion, false ones. But we're not that kind of people, and we haven't done it. And we're still fighting to get rid of that law. But it's kind of funny. The people who support it are the ones most likely to engage in that kind of behavior.
Yep. All right. Any other comments on this story? Okay, we're gonna move on to the next one, though. This one is actually kind of interesting. Mike J, if you could, let's talk about rape loopholes. That sounds so bad.
It's not what it sounds like, FYI. So, Manhattan's top prosecutor, District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr., claims a legal loophole is preventing rapists from being charged with rape. Under current New York law, if an individual voluntarily becomes intoxicated and is sexually assaulted the one doing the assault cannot be charged with rape. This is due to the fact that according to New York law, someone who becomes intoxicated under their own volition, that's the important part there, under their own volition, is not considered to be mentally incapacitated and can therefore still give consent. Quote, there is no difference between an intoxicated individual's ability to consent to sexual acts when he or she was drugged and an intoxicated individual's ability to consent when he or she voluntarily drank alcohol or took narcotics, end quote, states District Attorney Vance in a letter to the Governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. This is not out of line with most states' interpretations of the law, with only 10 states specifically including voluntary intoxication as a reason for mental incapacitation. Quote, no one should be able to assault you simply because you put yourself in a case where dangerous things might happen. Similarly, if someone is drinking voluntarily and they become excessively drunk, that's not a green light for someone to sexually assault you, end quote, states District Attorney Vance in the same letter. Despite the district attorney's letter being sent well over a year ago, the governor's office has not responded to it. A senior advisor to Governor Cuomo, Rich Asapardi, claims the governor's office has no record of receiving this letter.
Of course they didn't. The government never receives anything that they don't want to know about. But, and here we go. Here's my big but. I agree with the law on this. I don't think there's any difference between intoxicated consent and sober consent. Now, and so I don't consider the person who has sex with a consenting adult who is drunk to be a rapist. In particular, there are instances where someone has been the sexual aggressor while they're drunk and then turned around and accused the person that they seduced of rape, even though they were also drunk. That's bullshit. You know, it's not the same as stumbling across somebody who's passed out and taking advantage of their actual incapacitated state while you're sober, or simply using drugs in somebody's drink to knock them out so that you can take advantage of them. That is a totally different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone tries to refuse and you are better able to force yourself on them because they're too drunk to fight back, this law wouldn't stop that person from prosecuting. They can simply say, I fought back, but I was too drunk to be effective. Not, my consent was invalid. So I think that's actually a good thing that the law differentiates between someone feeling regretful of their choice while drunk versus someone whose refusal was overridden by somebody that decided that they weren't allowed to say no.
Mm-hmm.
That should be differentiated between.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising that New York has, or that this is going on in New York, in Manhattan. I wonder, because this is like the thing about drinking and sex is that it's a really gray area. It's tricky in a lot of ways, because if a man buys a woman a drink, like, how are they classifying whether someone is voluntarily or involuntarily intoxicated? And what I mean by that is, I have a clear idea of what that is. If a woman makes a decision, or a man for that matter, makes a decision to either buy drinks or allow someone else to buy them drinks and drink with them, and they do so until they become wasted, then I think that that's voluntarily intoxicating yourself. And I don't think that you could really argue against that. But I think that in the realm of because the Independent obviously is writing this from the perspective of, this is really messed up that it exists, this is terrible, or whatever, it's going to affect women, this is awful stuff. And I know that a lot of people would probably say the same. They would say that, you should never, drunk people cannot give consent, period. In particular, drunk women can't give consent, because in general they usually ignore the men, as we just discussed in the Brock Turner case, is why this story comes right after that one. So the question becomes,
I will give Vance
ahead.
credit in his quotations in this. He did maintain gender neutral language.
Yeah, I noticed that. Well, I think that's like if you're going to approach the law, that's how you got to do it. I mean,
even though the article didn't.
Well, yeah, the article, no, because it's the Independent. So, like, if we were going to follow it in the fairest way possible, that would be the best way to do it. However, what's going to happen is, if it's not already happening, which I'm sure it is, there will be arguments like, what if a woman is pressured or coerced to drink? What if someone put something in her drink that she was buying voluntarily, but she doesn't know that there's something in there, and so on. And this is the reason why this is going to be a difficult thing for people to treat fairly, because that sort of lobbying will occur.
What if she's a wimp and has a low tolerance for alcohol?
Yeah.
Not that I would know anything about that.
Well, I mean, that's another thing too.
Can you imagine, right? Like, let's say Karen and I were both 19-year-old freshmen in college, and we both went to a party, and we both had a couple of glasses of wine. Karen will be fine. She's got a very strong constitution. She's used to drinking a little bit at a time for long stretches of time. And wine is part of her family's historical culture. It's not really part of my family's historical culture. Like maybe back in in my ancestors' old countries, but I don't come from a very heavy drinking family, or even a light drinking family, right? And then I'm a wimp on top of that. Like, I will admit that firsthand. I'm a wimp when it comes to alcohol. So I might be drunk off my ass after two glasses of wine. My blood alcohol content might not be any higher than hers. And say both of us go off with different guys and have sex. Am I rape victim because I didn't handle my alcohol as well as she handled hers?
And how could you measure that? Like, that's the thing. Like, there's just, the problem is that if we define this by the law, we have to be as dispassionate and objective as possible. And I don't think people should even be drinking unless they know what comes with that. And this isn't to blame the victim, like some people might say. This is to be, to be realistic. Like, if you get drunk and do anything, you're putting yourself at some risk. Like, not just get behind the wheel or, go home, take somebody to your place or go to their place or whatever. Go for a walk, decide to go swimming, any number of things. There could be consequences.
Deciding to go swimming while drunk is a really bad idea, by the way. But or deciding to take a nap while lying on your back while drunk is a really bad idea.
Yeah.
But I'm going to approach this from another angle too. Sorry to do this, but this is something. So this story came out a few days ago that was just, this was gut wrenching. I read it. I'm like, holy shit. I've always been kind of glad my family never got a trampoline. And there's all kinds of stupid injuries that happen with backyard trampolines. And they can be fun, but for Pete's sake, there's just too many accidents that can happen. It's not really worth getting one, in my opinion. And nobody in our family really desperately wanted one. So I never had to have that argument. And about 5 days ago, I guess, 5 days ago, almost exactly, this headline: 12-year-old impaled by trampoline spring that shot into his back like a bullet. The spring, actually, if I remember right from this is the one I read before, actually wasn't properly maintained, but they thought they were safe because they had one of those, usually trampoline injuries are somebody falls down on the edge of the trampoline and they break a leg, or they end up with some sort of a sprain or a strain or stuff like that. Not this spring that just comes loose and shoots out of nowhere. So a lot of people got this netting that you can put up around your trampoline, so you don't, and these big cushy bumpers to put over the netting, so you don't have injuries from hitting the edge of the trampoline. Well, there's people that get injured on the netting. And this injury, they had no way to predict it. So they thought they were safe because they had a safety net. So they engaged in a risky behavior because they had a safety net. And this kid got hurt, like seriously hurt. It went through his chest. He's in the hospital now. And it's not necessarily that the parents were irresponsible in comparison to other parents, or that the kid was irresponsible in comparison to other kids. This is one of the drawbacks of safety nets, is that people will take risks when they feel there is a safety net that they will not take if they have to pay attention, full attention, to their own safety. So when society turns around and starts saying, well, yeah, these choices normally have consequences, but let's protect just women from the consequences of these choices. We'll transfer accountability for women's safety under these circumstances to the men around them, right? We'll say women should be able to do this set of really stupid things, make this set of really stupid choices, and they should never, ever face the consequence of a bad person taking advantage of those choices, right? So we'll actually say, let's protect them. Let's make men responsible. What happens? More women are going to take those risks, particularly young women who are raised to believe that they're not responsible for the consequences of their actions. Somebody else is. And then you have more women who have alcohol poisoning. You have more women who go swimming while drunk and drown. You have more women who suffocate on their own vomit. You have more women who end up pregnant and don't know who the father is because they were drunk when they had sex. You have more women who engage in a whole range of self-destructive behaviors, because why not? They're not responsible for the consequences of their choices. And then you have more children whose mothers made bad choices and now don't know what to do with themselves and don't know what to do with their children, because society has told them, you made bad choices. It's not your fault. It's the fault of the people you were with.
Mm-hmm. You didn't make any bad choices. You did everything right. Nothing is your fault.
Exactly. So safety nets are something that you use. Say, I'm going to walk a tightrope. A safety net would be nice. Okay, then you need a safety net. I'm going to climb this great big steel tower and change the light bulb at the top of it. I should have something that'll attach me to the tower so I can't fall off. And I won't go up there if it looks like it might, storm. Those are smart safety nets. Dumb safety nets are people should be able to engage in stupid behavior without consequences. Let's put up a safety net. The opposite happens. You get more consequences. We need to stop doing that.
All right. I know that Randomcam was trying to say something a little while ago. Did you want to... Do you remember that?
Almost forgotten. Move on.
Okay.
Something interesting of note. I was trying to find this letter that District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. sent to Governor Cuomo.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't find it, mostly because if you look for District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr., you get a lot of articles concerning him and another guy you might have heard, Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
A lot about him and how his office sought reduced sex offender status for him.
Well, that's interesting. Although
Well,
not surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, and others about how he has a bad habit of failing to prosecute powerful people, and this has basically completely taken over almost nearly any search of his name. Apparently, he ain't too popular in Manhattan, it seems.
Well, probably not. I'm certainly not gonna be siding with Epstein on any fucking thing, but I think in terms of this drinking thing, I think that we either treat we either hold women and men to the same standard, or we do special favors for women. If we do special favors for women, then they don't deserve to have the amount of authority that they currently have. So it's either we give them the same responsibility or we take away their authority. You can't have both. And I'd rather we just treat them the same. So I think that that's going to be better for everybody. So yeah. So, I mean, you know what? And the thing is, too, is that as far as like alcohol tolerance, and then we got to move on. But as far as alcohol tolerance goes, and because people use that to say, well, look, men and women aren't the same. Men have like a higher whatever. Well, what if there are men that have an extremely low tolerance and they get into a problem? Do we just not give a shit because they're men? Do we treat them like something that they're not, essentially? So, and what about a woman who has a really high tolerance like Karen does? So no, I mean, all we can do is try to treat people equally to the letter of the law as though gender was not relevant. It's either we do that or we have two different classes of people. And if we're going to have two different classes of people, then let's just be out with it.
And there's something else. The letter of the law needs to move back a step. We have allowed in our society the letter of the law to be moved to an area that creates a gray area in terms of adult sexual interaction. We used to have an understanding. It was obviously wrong that the understanding was only when women were victimized, but we used to have an understanding that the act of rape was the act of deliberately contravening the victim's right or ability to refuse.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be force, that could be violence, right? Or that could be coercion, compelling coercion. That could be the use of incapacitation. Incapacitation meaning the individual is literally unable to fight back, literally unable to refuse. Not the individual gives invalid consent, but literally unable to refuse. Right? That's what rape was. And feminists have pushed for this other standard, this consent standard, knowing that they were going to then push for, well, it has to be valid and enthusiastic consent. And eventually, they're going to push for the idea that women are never able to consent to sex with a man because of the power differential that they claim exists between men and women. So eventually it will be all heterosexual sex is rape. That is the goal behind feminist push, behind the changing standards on rape. And it needs to be pushed back. It needs to be genderless, and it needs to be about contravention of the victim's right or ability to refuse. And that's it.
Yep. All right, so let us know what you guys think in the comments. We're going to move on to the next story because we're coming up on the second hour of the show now, and I try not to make these too long. So we're going to be talking about Siri. I hope you guys don't have Siri, but if you do, maybe this will move you away from that. Apple's Siri voice assistant is being rewritten to deflect questions about feminism and #MeToo. Yes, deflect questions about feminism. The internal project has Siri's responses to ensure that, quote, the service would say it was in favor of equality, but never say the word feminism, even when asked direct questions about the topic. According to The Guardian, leaked documents explain that, quote, Siri should be guarded when dealing with potentially controversial content, end quote. When Siri was asked, are you a feminist? One of her responses was, sorry, user, I don't really know. The rewritten stances include, quote, I believe that all voices are created equal and worth equal respect, and it seems to me that all humans should be treated equally, end quote. Sam Smethers, the chief executive of women's rights campaigners, the Fawcett Society, said, quote, the problem with Siri, Alexa, and all of these AI tools is that they have been designed by men with a male default in mind. You know, they're voiced by women, but okay. I hate to break it to Siri and its creators. If it believes in equality, then Siri is a feminist. That's what they
Siri
say.
can read the second definition. You guys can't for some reason.
I guess questions about feminism are a serious issue.
I'll say it.
Oh, come on. You know I had to do that.
Yeah, I know.
I had to.
I invited
You had
that.
to do it to him. I get it. Am I the only one that doesn't see the problem with this? Like, I'm kind of glad Apple's going out of their way to be like, yeah, nah, she ain't gonna talk to you about feminism, bro. Like, this is something that she's gonna actively try to avoid doing because they don't want to get into it, and that's weirdly respectable. And I don't like to say the word respectable and Apple in the same sentence.
Yeah, it is a bit
I don't
weird.
have any problem with
But
it.
you should. Well, I think that you might want to ask Siri what she would say if you said, "Hey, are you an MRA?" Or
Yeah,
you
honestly,
know.
I really don't care what Siri says if I ask it if it's well, I don't have an Apple phone.
Yeah, I don't
those
know
are a
if it's
little
a
outside my price
capitalist
range.
or a fucking traditionalist or a socialist or anything, because it's fucking Siri. It's not supposed to be an ism.
I know if we asked her about what an MR is, she'd probably say like, "Oh, you mean magnetic resonance
image that
geography?" Which is
what
the
I
first
think is
hit on
really
Google,
funny.
so not wrong.
Yeah. But what I think is really funny is this Sam Smothers, this woman's rights campaigner who is upset that Siri doesn't answer that oh, I'm a feminist. It's an AI. It's not even an extremely complicated AI. Its job is to find information and then regurgitate it for you. It's not supposed to think for itself. It's not supposed to have opinions. It's not supposed to have a political ideology. It's not even supposed to have a preference for flavors or colors or particular words or anything like that. It's just supposed to give you information when you ask for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this, oh, I'm very offended. If it believes in equality, it's a feminist. I have bad news for them. I hate to break it to them. Like, sorry, but if that's true, if you really believe that, then you shouldn't be upset at its answer. It's giving the right one.
If you're gonna give a protocol droid a personality, would you rather have C-3PO or that fucking feminist droid from whichever movie it was?
Oh yeah, right. The solo droid.
Yeah. And that's funny you mentioned this, Hannah, because that's exactly if you read later in the article, that's exactly kind of how Apple discusses how they went about creating Siri. That she is supposed to sort of have that sort of stuff kind of coded into her. She's supposed to be the quote here: in nearly our cases, Siri doesn't have a point of view. Siri is supposed to be non-human, incorporeal, placeless, genderless, playful, and humble. Basically, she is supposed to be C-3PO.
Sounds like they've done a good job with her.
Well, it's funny because my thing is that the fact that, like to what you guys are saying, it makes sense that it wouldn't necessarily take a stance. But what is funny is that these feminists like Sam Smothers, the chief executive of the Fawcett Society, they get bent out of shape that Siri doesn't identify as a feminist and literally says the problem with Siri is that she was designed by men and that's why she's not taking a stance. Well, I got news for you, men that designed this AI. If she believes in equality, this AI is a feminist. And I don't know if Alexa and Cortana and I don't know what else is out there. Bixby, I think, is another one. I don't know if those are, programmed to respond the same way, but it's just really, it drives me nuts. It's really funny that feminists find it so important that everything identifies with their label, even artificial intelligence.
And in fact, she just captured feminism in a nutshell. The problem with blank is it was developed by men. But, feminism is not about hating men, right?
Oh, no, it's not. It's not.
By the way, they don't want C-3PO. They want Dot Matrix. Dot Matrix was the robot from Spaceballs that was a parody of C-3PO.
Yeah, voiced by Joan Rivers. Quite funny.
Yes.
So... anybody else have any thoughts on this silly little story before we move on? Okay, so you guys that are watching, I do have some super chat here. Let us know what you guys think about Siri. Do you guys have any of these artificial intelligence things? Why do you have them? I feel like they listen to our conversations. I know I'm going into, you know what? I just want to put this out there. This is going to go into a little bit of maybe people might see this as a bit conspiratorial, but I've actually had experience with this. Okay. I have had conversations with Lindsay about little things. Like, we're in the living room, we're not on our computers, we're just talking, and our phones are in the room with us, right? And I will be talking to her about something that I might be having a craving for cheese. This happened like a few days ago. I was like, she was like, ordering groceries, right? And I'm like, hey, can you get me those cheese cubes? I want those cheese cubes. They're like snacking cheeses, right? And she's like, no, I'll just get you a block and cut it. And I'm like, okay, whatever. It's cheaper that way. It's fine. Then like the next day, I'm like looking for stories for the news show. It's actually today, this morning. And there was advertising for fucking cheese cubes on my Facebook page as I was like looking for stories. And this is not like, this happens all the time where I'll be talking about, I remember years ago, I was like, oh man, you know, I kind of like want, you know, a new stove, a new oven, right, for the house. Advertising for ovens on my Facebook page. Crazy. From Amazon, right? So like, if you have one of these things in your house, do you run into this weird shit where you're talking about something? Because Bixby's on my phone, even though I've never used it. It just comes with it. Have you ever seen that? And do you think it's creepy, or am I just like paranoid? Let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to hit like. Okay, so
people have done this. People have done this before, Brian. They've done this
Yeah.
experiment. Basically, turn on all the tracking, turn on all the can listen to you at any time shit, and look up some crazy foreign product you've never heard of before, and then do nothing but talk about it for like 10 minutes. Just use it in conversations, bring it up, say the word, say you're looking to buy, say you're interested in buying, say you might buy in the future, and then start refreshing a couple of pages with automatic AdSense ads on them. And magically look as this product takes over your internet experience.
Yeah, you know what? Something else happened that was just like that. I like board games, right? And I have some board games in the apartment. And I was like thinking, you know, because Halloween's coming up, and I'm start thinking about like horror themed gaming that I want to do, movies I want to watch, things like that. And I was like, man, you know, it'd be really cool if there was like a horror themed board game, like maybe a J horror game. Sure enough, I got an advertisement for a fucking J horror themed board game that was actually exported from Japan. It's called Hako Onna. And now that I've said that, I'm probably gonna get more ads for it. But if you're interested, you should go check it out. And cyberpunk stuff. Yeah, that's right. My wife's just saying so. Because we were talking about Cyberpunk 2077. But anyway, let me look at your super chats. I got one from French Honey Badger for $5, and he says, I don't want Siri to deal with controversial issues. The idea to deflect the question is the right thing to do, in my opinion. I appreciate that. Yeah. French Honey Badger gives another $5.
The Apple employee.
Yeah, says the Apple employee. He also gives another $5 and says, Siri cannot record anything or send any data unless Hey Siri is heard by the mic that is hardware separated. Well, yeah, I guess that's the true of a lot of, maybe I'm a little bit on, that's a bit of a tangent, because I think it's not so much things like Siri or whatever, but maybe Google, because there's Hey Google, and I know Google listens to your conversations. I'm pretty sure they do. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments section. I'd be really interested. And now we're going to move on to the last story, which is, it's the story that should not come as a surprise to anyone from the last time we covered this on Tuesday of last week. I will hand this off to Mike. We're going to be following up with Zoe Quinn's adventures, or misadventures as they might be. Okay, Mike J, if you
how
could.
about Trainwreck?
Yeah.
So it's barely been 2 weeks since Zoe Quinn took to Twitter to accuse fellow game developer Alec Haloka of improprieties during their brief 2012 relationship. Quinn's accusations sparked a chain of events that would eventually lead to Haloka's suicide. But in the 2 weeks that have followed, Quinn's claims have come under scrutiny. Some of her claims even appear to be outright fabrications, and the evidence for this comes from Quinn's own tweets.
No way.
Shocker, right?
I did not see that coming.
Get your surprise Pikachu face ready, because you're going to have a lot of chances to use it in this one. An anonymous source with access to Quinn's locked Twitter account has reached out to website The Post Millennial with screenshots of various posts from 2012 that seem to contradict Quinn's 2019 claims. These tweets provide a window into Quinn's life and mindset from around the beginning of April 2012 to around the start of May 2012, which is the entirety of Quinn's stay in Winnipeg with Holowoka. The first claim that seems to be thoroughly debunked by Quinn's own words is that she was, quote, not allowed to leave the apartment, that, quote, Holowoka has physically confined her to his apartment, and that, quote, Holowoka isolated her from everyone else in her life. Quinn specifically discusses trips to fabric stores, acting in musicals, and working on the game at a local coffee shop. Quinn also arranged multiple indie game developer meetups with Holowoka's help while in Winnipeg. Quinn and Holowoka appeared on an indie games podcast in which she went into detail about her daily life and how she met Holowoka. Another of Quinn's claims that appear to be false is that Holowoka had taken control of the indie game that they were working on together and was actively blocking or disregarding her input. Once again, Quinn's own tweets seem to disprove this notion. She made multiple references to working on the game, even while sick, posted screenshots of her work on the game, and even discusses how Holowoka provides her with inspiration and insight when designing the game. Quinn also details a harrowing ordeal in which Holowoka kept putting off buying her a plane ticket back home, as the original agreement was she would buy her ticket out there and he would buy her ticket back. While not all these claims can be I skipped a sentence there. So, like I said, that was the deal, and that she was only able to escape with the last-minute help of a friend buying her a ticket. And while not all of those claims can be verified as true or false, Quinn's own tweets in which she bemoans a layover in Montreal and attempts to organize a meetup reveal that she was aware of the plan to leave Winnipeg at least 10 days before she actually left. And during this alleged escape, Quinn accuses Holowoka of barely looking at her as she left. But she also tweeted that both her and Holowoka were working on the game mere hours before she left.
Very interesting.
You're noggin a jogging, Brian?
Yeah, a little bit. It's almost like she's full of shit. And this is proof of that. Just like I said last Tuesday. Just like I said then. I don't believe it. And there's like, I mean, I look, it's just, if anything else comes out of this, it's going to be more revealing, more stuff that reveals that she is in fact a manipulative liar. And the point of this story is not to just talk about this individual, because the thing is, the story is not Zoe Quinn, the train wreck. The story is the amount of people who are coming out in defense of her, regardless of the shit that she does, and that the way in which we sort of collectively respond to it, even though a lot of people were against it. Like, I think Lori Penny, which is the story I'm going to be doing in the after show, she came out in defense of, Zoe Quinn, obviously, believe women kind of a narrative, but it didn't age very well considering what we now know. But what's interesting about it is that there are still people that are going to believe her. They're going to side with her in one way or another. So, yeah, I mean, it's just the truth comes out eventually.
This is kind of there's a larger phenomenon here, not just with respect to her specifically, but women with this behavior pattern in general. And like if you look at men versus women who are sociopaths or who have borderline personality disorder and narcissism or any number of other personality disorders that can manifest in a pattern of basically victim signaling, victim identity signaling, and lies about people and scapegoating and so on, when the person's whole web of fakeness falls apart. Like, men don't get away with it as easily unless they put themselves in a position of extreme power, like as the CEO of a company, and then eventually they're still going to fall. Then eventually when they fall, they're going to take their company down with them, or they're going to be completely removed from it if they were dumb or smart enough to allow other people to gain a large amount of power in their company as well. But women can be absolutely nobody, because honestly, Quinn's entire claim to fame is that she played victim of being criticized for cheating on her boyfriend. Like, that's it. There is really nothing else that she has done that is notable. Everything else that's come after that, other people have done those things and not gotten famous for it.
Yep. She should not have become anyone. She should have stayed nobody. Right. And I'm saying now, there's the stink around that made her famous is the victimhood.
Yeah, it's not just her.
No.
Though it's her and Anita Sarkeesian and all of the literally who's, and even like you look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Yeah. I wanted to call her Andrea. I don't know why. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was a bartender. And she's, most of her career so far in politics has been playing victim of being criticized for doing politics badly, for being irrational, and for not understanding basically how the things that she is trying to govern work, for being power hungry, for being willing to abuse her position. She's played victim of all of it. That's like her big thing. The reason that she's so well known is because she's young, inexperienced, irrational, and a very good complainer when it comes to dealing with people's criticism, but not so good at actually assessing herself and building a better politician out of what she finds. And this is, only women can do this. Men cannot get away with this for any really serious length of time. Like, men will never have that ability. Even men who are rich and powerful are still subject to attempts to take them down with flimsy accusations, with victim signaling from the women around them. And when they come out clean, if they come out clean, then there are complaints that they came out clean. And then they're presumed powerful for having survived wrongful attacks. When a guy actually is faced with a legitimate attack, he ends up in prison committing fake suicide in order to protect the other people around him who have been a part of his wrongness. So this is just, if anything, what has happened in this situation, this tragedy, and it is a huge tragedy. This tragedy, if anything else, tells you women are in a huge position of power, and it is a huge detriment to the people around them that they can engage in a level of dysfunction that indicates a severe personality disorder, and build a celebrity status on it, and even go so far as to contribute to the reasons why a person kills himself, and come out of it playing victim of being criticized for their behavior. Like, Quinn's not really important in this at all, but everything that has happened around her, better be paying attention.
Yeah, for anyone who's wondering, does this mean Gamergate is finally over? Is this it? Is it dead now? No, it is not dead now. Gamergate either died some time ago or sometime in the future, but not right now, which proves it was never about Quinn.
Like I said, it's 2 months. Every time someone says it's dead, it lives another 2 months.
Well, what people don't understand is that Gamergate is actually a cat. Only it's not an ordinary cat. It is a zombie cat. So it has 9 lives, and then it has, an eternity of zombiehood. It will never truly die. It'll always just be undead.
Could have sworn you were going to hit us with a Schrodinger's there.
I don't know. I
Can
thought
I
it was
ask,
going to
have
be
you-
something about cats
Nope.
having 9 lives. But go ahead, Mike.
Doesn't matter. I was doing the Schrodinger's joke.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is, if anything, this goes back to something that we said back in, probably we were saying this in like 2013, 2014. Gamergate was never about the thing that most Gamergate supporters believed, which was that it was just about, ethics in games journalism. We agreed with that you could say that sentiment, but the problem is that there is an ideological infestation everywhere, and gamers were just noticing it in their particular corner of the internet, in their hobby. But it's not just in hobbies. It's not just in your workplace. It's underlying the culture. It's everywhere. It's the reason why that woman, Emily Poe, was able to write a book about an assault that she couldn't possibly remember. It's the reason why we're talking about these stories of Siri not being a good AI because it was built by men and it doesn't identify as a feminist. It's the reason why we have a Ms. Monopoly game. It's the reason why there is this story that a man could be essentially driven to suicide by someone that's so toxic that any normal person with a healthy with healthy relationships and a knowledge of who you should be spending your time around, those people should be avoiding her, but they don't, and they're attracted to that, in fact, which is just beyond my understanding. It is something that undergirds every aspect of our culture, and it is doing damage everywhere at the same time. And I'm not talking about individual people. I mean, yes, there are actors that are worse than others, right? It's in our politics, and it's with the squad. It's involved in some level. It's with Brexit. It's involved in Antifa. It's like, it's a sickness. We live in a very sick time, and this is the problem. And this is the reason why Gamergate, as something that Alison said back in 2015, it will never end, because what we're up against is far bigger than that. And it's time that, you guys see it for what it is. This Zoe Quinn stuff, she is small potatoes, man. But there's something there that's far larger that would tell you, why is this person significant? Because we have a sickness that basically lets these people become big names. They make headlines, people die, and we talk about it. It is literally cancer. And people are not fighting it right. They think that it's the common cold. There was people that say things like, well, feminists are only about, I saw 3% of the population. That's retarded, dude. It's an idea. It's not a number of people. It's not names. It's an idea that has infected most of us. To let it go is very difficult. And these are this is an extreme example, but these are the kinds of results you're going to get. You're going to see more cases like this, where we give women praise, profit, resources, and the worst kinds. Like, we reward the worst behavior, and we get more of that behavior. Meanwhile, we shit all over men and masculinity at every turn, and it's only going to make things worse. So this is just another symptom, and I feel like I'm beating a drum here, but it's time to stop saying, oh, Gamergate is dead. Oh, it's so cringe. Oh, whatever. You're not up against that, man. It's way bigger. Talking about Gamergate is like talking about one pimple when you have like chronic acne all over. It's time to address the root of the problem, which is what it was always. That was always the problem, guys. So I don't know. I mean, I'm rambling, but that's basically where I am with that.
We've heard all our lives about the cult of personality. What people don't recognize is that in our society we have another phenomenon, the victim identity cult. And I mean, I've been talking about this on HBR Talk on and off for quite some time, a large portion actually of the short time I've had the show. And this is the thing people don't realize about social justice ideology is that is the underlying thing in it. Everything else is a scaffolding built on top of the foundation of a victim identity. Everybody in the social justice cult is either part of a victim identity or a supporter of a victim identity. Everybody who is unable to have a victim identity of their own has to latch on to a victim identity in order to be part of the cult. So you have all of the demographics that are given victim status, whether it's women, whether it's minorities, whether it's religious groups, people who have been victimized by sexual violence, any of those people who have been in domestic violent relationships, any of those areas, you have your victim identity as part of the cult, and everything about you is wrapped up in that victim identity. It is, and it's not just, it's a sickness for them and it's a sickness for society, but it's not just a surface sickness. It is an all-consuming, like when Brian described it as cancer, it is exactly that. It is an all-consuming, constantly growing thing that kills off the personality of the individual, of the host, and takes over. And all you end up with, all they have left is everything about them is defined by that victimhood. And they cease to be able to relate to the rest of the world outside of that victimhood. If you take that victimhood away, it's like killing them. They don't even understand how to exist without it. And so when they see somebody like Quinn, who is a beacon of victimhood, right? That's all that she projects of herself is victimhood. They're going to latch onto her and they're going to elevate her. And because she has demographic aspects that are conducive to that. She's female. She claims to be a victim of intimate partner abuse, and she claims to be a victim of sexual abuse. And so that puts her in 3 victim classes. So that makes her identity, her victim identity, huge. And then she can claim to have been abused by a large number of people on the internet because people disagreed with her other claims, and that makes it even bigger. So they're going to flock toward her like moths to a bug zapper. And you're going to see people around her getting zapped over and over again because she has what attracts them. She has what to them is a clarion call. They have to go. They have to hold her up. They have to be part of this. And that cult uses that victim signaling, uses that victim identity and the cry bullying associated with that victim identity as a means of controlling everyone around it. You have to do what we say because basically, that's the thing about Gamergate, is that it was a conflict between people who are part of that victim identity cult and people to whom it is alien. So, no, it's not going to die. That's existed forever and it's going to continue to exist. We just have to get to a point in our society where that is not something that is acceptable. And because we have made life easier and easier in our society, we don't have to fight the elements most of the time. I mean, we get really terrified when there's something like a hurricane that comes along because we don't have any control over that, right? When a tornado hits, we don't have any control over that, but we rebuild afterwards. We are not in a position where we don't have shelter from the elements. We don't have a way to get out of the area when there's a hurricane coming. We don't have a way to we don't lack a way to recover when there's been an earthquake or a fire. So we're not in the situation we were, 500 years ago or 100 years ago, even when we didn't have the level of medicine we have now. And so we don't have to fight those things. We're in a position where it's easier for us to accept that toxic, poisonous, cancerous victim identity cult. We have to actually learn how to fight it without we have these things to deal with as a reason. And I like strontium nitrate, X nitrate says Rebecca Watson 2.0. Rebecca Watson 2000 is what is this case. Rebecca Watson 3000. She's not the first, and she won't be the last. And she's a blip on the radar.
Yeah.
Like there's barely even any need for attention to the specific people who are doing this. And the more we pay attention to the specific people who are doing it and not the thing that is being done, the more we get blinded to the need to stop the thing instead of worrying about, our relationship to those specific people. Who cares who it is? Who care what happened?
Go ahead, Mike.
When we look at the progressive stack, the sort of the social justice hierarchy, a lot of sort of conservatives and other such normies interpret it as, well, obviously the trans are at the top of the stack, or the gays are at the top of the stack, and women are up below all of them, or they go, oh, obviously Muslims are at the top of the stack, or blacks are at the top of the stack, and obviously they all understand that straight white men are at the bottom, but they all think women are below someone else. Who do you think's controlling the top of the stack? Who do you think's like at the bottom of the mountain, like putting things further and further on top of the stack? Like one moment it's Muslims, the next moment is blacks, the next is trans. The stack is being controlled by a common element in the stack that is mysteriously always above men. And I say women, and I don't mean white women or straight women. I mean whatever homogenous kind of women is in the nation or state in question. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's because they're able to hold someone else on the top of the stack that so many people take all their eye out on them, when it's really just women in all of these communities. It's the women controlling the stack, which I think is what's supposed to be at the top of the stack, but it's this whole switcheroo illusion thing or something.
Yep. In every subgroup there are females, and so they'll always take precedence. They'll always be like more oppressed because by virtue of them being female. And so like no matter how you slice it up, there's going to be women within those subgroups that are more oppressed than the men within those subgroups. And it only gets a little
women
bit.
are basically
a woman like Zoe Quinn, who has nothing going for her in terms of the progressive stack, because she's white, she's rich, she's high class, she's she's high paid, I think is what I meant to say. She's everything, but look, she's female, and so she's the darling of all these of every sort of media mainstream outlet out there. And if woe betide anyone who comes to her being gay or minority or even trans, he'll get struck down by the queen, who happens to be just an ordinary straight white female. She probably doesn't go by straight, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You think of it, women are basically to the side of the progressive stack, playing Jenga with it and declaring its arrangement at any given time. Yet another reason why society has to rearrange itself to accommodate their interests and sensibilities.
And with just one last comment about Zoe Quinn herself, the reason why I say it's not really about her, the idea that the ideology will use her to perpetuate itself. So whatever happens to Zoe Quinn, they'll use it to prop up their ideas. Like, it will be used, but she is as disposable as any other woman that could be used by that. And actually, I personally believe, as much of a train wreck as she is, part of the reason why that train wreck persists and she never course corrects her life is because she benefits from this victim ideology. And so she's actually going to suffer in the long run because she's not going to have her shit together. And no guy, if he's, I mean, maybe there is some guy. I should probably not be so complimentary to men. But it should get to a point where no man wants to have anything to do with somebody like this. Although that there is probably some guy that would. So, but my point is that, and that makes it worse too. Actually, if she can like essentially destroy all of her prospects, all of her ability to be self-realized, self-actualized, and make something of herself, because she can just cry victim whenever it's convenient, and then people just throw money at her and they rush to her protection and her defense, and articles get written, and she gets interviewed by fucking Rupley or Now This or whatever, and she gets to put her story out there, and Lori Penny, who's never met the woman, writes an article in her defense. Well, it's no wonder that she never becomes a better person. She's, you know, this, and that thing is that's not good for her. I actually, you know, part of me has pity for somebody like that, because it makes sure that they never grow and they always stay a child, which is what we're looking at. So I don't think it's about her, because it doesn't matter. This could easily be anybody. It's just a matter about who's useful to the ideology. We'll use them. And then like a used tampon, they get discarded and we move on to the next person. Because all that matters is the ideology persists and people will get trans. So yes, men get destroyed by this stuff, right? And it's bad. It's terrible. I talked about Alec Haloka last week. You know that I care about the men that are affected by this. But women are also affected by this. Even women like Zoe Quinn. Because I know that girl's not happy. She's a mess. All right, anybody else got anything to say about this? All right, I got one more super chat, and then we'll go into the after show then. So French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, this search engine is bad. It cannot find what I want, versus this search engine finds exactly what I want. That's creepy. Thank you. I just don't want things listening to me. I'd rather search when I'm ready to look for stuff. That's just me, though. It's a little bit weird. I'm not saying I'm for it.
It might be explainable through some statistical wizardry. Like,
No.
About cheese cubes, then there might be some other point in the day when you were thinking about snacks and you were looking up things on YouTube and you happened to type the word, or on Google or whatever.
There's actually articles about this. It's not that.
Just I'm thinking of it from a Darren Brown perspective. You can implant these things, but they all sort of accumulate at the end, and you don't understand why.
Here's the thing: if you have something like Cortana or Siri or anything, and you have it enabled, and you have your smartphone on all the time, it is constantly, as part of its programming, it's constantly listening for you to ask it to look things up. Right? It's supposed to be able to respond with the information you want every single time. So as part of its design, it's going to hear everything you say. And it just wasn't programmed to ignore anything. So of course it's going to pick up on that stuff. And
it was programmed to ignore everything except Hey Siri.
Except it doesn't. It's just not programmed to respond when you say when you say anything that's not Hey Siri. And that's just it. What we're learning is that it still takes the time to find that information, because if it didn't, it wouldn't work its way into Facebook's advertising system. And it doesn't cost anything to have that program on your phone. We don't pay a fee for it, so we're paying for it in information. And if you don't want it spying on you, you have to turn it off. Like, there isn't really an in-between there. It's just like if you don't want Google keeping track of what you search for on Google's engines, as much as I can't stand Google's actual evil behaviors, their attempts at manipulating society to their own interests without, any say in the matter from the people they're trying to manipulate. That I think is reprehensible behavior. But when you search for something on Google and it remembers that you search for that, that's not creepy. That's what it's supposed to do. And when you have something on your phone that's supposed to hear you talk and it hears you talk, that I don't think that's necessarily creepy either. That's what it's supposed to do. So I guess in that instance, like when you get a new device, you really should explore it. That's interesting, and it's got all kinds of neat things it can do, and it's got all kinds of neat features you can turn on and off, and it's like basically a new toy to play with, in addition to being a tool. And I don't understand why people don't do that, because that shit's fascinating. But nobody seems to, and then they get upset when they don't know all the functions. And I know I sound like a complete and utter nerd for saying that, but if anybody can understand that, it should be this crowd.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying I'm going to throw my phone away or I'm going to switch off of that. I'm just saying it was a weird thing that happened. That's all. So I'm
And
not.
for anyone who's ever experienced that thing where all you did was think about a product, like quietly to yourself, and then a couple of days later it turns up, at that point you do need my sort of statistical wizardry to explain why that happens, because you think in cycles, you know, and it just comes back and you forget most of the cycles, you know.
Mm-hmm. All right. So anyway, so that's it. Does anybody have any final thoughts on this story or any of the other ones that we talked about?
I just want to leave somebody with this image. If you think it's funny that or weird or whatever that you talk about something and then you get that shit advertised to you for however long, or you look something up on the internet and then you get that shit advertised to you for however long, just imagine what it's like to be researching the stuff that we have to research for some of the stories that we go over on this show and some of the topics that we talk about on HBR Talk. Like when I had to research things like sexual abuse or the school to prison pipeline or the environmentalist shit that I had to go over that one time, and what kind of ads you end up with.
Shit ends up getting weird, yo.
Yeah. So there you go.
All right. So I guess if that's it, we're going to move on to the after show where we're going to look at Lori Penny's article on the Zoe Quinn situation. Of course, this is before this recent news regarding all of the inconsistencies and holes in her story. Let's be a little bit charitable. But I still want to see what Lori Penny is saying, because it does work from her own assumptions and it could be fun to look at. So if you want to be a part of that, you have to join us in the Badger Cave, that is our Discord, by going to feedthebadger.com, starting a $5 minimum monthly subscription. It's a cup of coffee, guys. You guys can do it. $5 a month, right? I think it's a month. And that'll get you into our Discord. So please consider doing that. And we hope to see you guys in there, where you can watch the bonus content. If you have a higher level, you can talk with us in the Discord. There are people there to hang out with. It's just it's a good little, community, let's say. So please consider doing so by going to feedthebadger.com and starting a monthly subscription. So with that said, I'm going to ask you guys one more time to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, and hit the bell for notifications, as well as leave us a comment. So, that said, I will be getting out of here. Thanks, guys, for coming on the HBR News Show, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one.